My question is to anyone who would like to take it. Yes, we have discussed a lot about Britain and the intention of Britain to rejoin the European Union. The question is Europe ready for that to happen? And number two, especially because Britain has shown itself to be a disloyal partner. Number two, in a few decades from now, as you say, this could happen, 20, 25 years, I'm sure free trade agreement with countries like India, part of the Commonwealth, would happen at some point. What would be the relationship then if they do join with countries like this, because that would have moved forward? Thank you.
It's a great question, and in terms of, so I used to be a member of the European Parliament, so I keep in regular contact with former colleagues of mine, some of whom have gone on to lead their respective countries, and there is a consensus really that is unspoken, which is that they would welcome us back, that there is a light that's been left on in terms of the prospect of the UK rejoining the EU. That's not to say it would be easy. There would be a lot of nervousness in the other institutions, in the Commission in particular, where any sort of sense of unstable political consensus in this country would cause a lot of nervousness. So look, let's not underestimate the task ahead of us in terms of rejoining the EU. This is a mammoth task. It's one that I think is utterly achievable. I think it's achievable by some of the steps that we've outlined tonight. But that consensus, political consensus, is something that would make the Commission very nervous indeed. But here's the thing, it's not up to the Commission, it's actually up to the Member States. And I can tell you that the Member States very much see that geopolitical interest of having the UK in, even though we've been a difficult partner in the past. Look at some of the current members and some of the current member state governments, thinking of Hungary, for example, where there are constant issues to do with the rule of law and antagonism between the Commission, the Parliament and the Hungarian government. And when put in that context, the UK's membership is actually pretty beneficial for everyone else, and that's how they see it. I think your question about India is really fascinating because, of course, in terms of the relationship between the UK and India, it's India who would have the bigger economy in terms of any future trade deal. And of course, it is the European Union as well that is pursuing trade negotiations with India. Like any other trade deal, I think we would get a better trade deal with India were we part of the European family, negotiating that as part of a bigger club, because ultimately India would be the superior partner in terms of relations between the UK and India, and that's something that I think people in the British government probably haven't worked out yet.
I'll add a bit to that because I spent 5 years negotiating with India as part of the European Union common approach to negotiation, and the Indians weren't wildly interested. They are quite protectionist as a country. They were wanting things from the UK in terms of freer immigration, which the British government wasn't willing to give. And it wasn't really, from their point of view, worth a candle. But it's worth noting, I mean, India is now, in some measures, the third biggest economy in the world. It will almost certainly be catching up with China in 20 years' time. We are now the 9th. We're just fallen behind Indonesia in the sort of global size pecking order. And I think one of the great tragedies of Brexit, it was founded on a kind of arrogant assumption that the rest of the world was queuing up to do business with Britain, and they're not. The Americans aren't terribly interested, and they've got a very protectionist Congress. They would certainly give high priority to negotiating the European Union. China probably would, but there are all kind of political complications, need I say more. India doesn't give it high priority. Most of the former Commonwealth countries are already tied into a very attractive deal with the European Union. We've got nothing to add to that. So I think actually what comes out of it is, Britain has got to develop a sense of modesty. The rest of the world doesn't need us. But we need, we need the European Union. And it's not obvious that they're going to welcome us back. We've been highly disruptive. So in a question, we need to start asking the question, what can we contribute to the European project? We've shown in defence terms that we can offer something, but science, defence, other things, we've got to make the case for joining Europe. They're not waiting for us to come back.
Well, just a minute. Basis of Europe started off as a deal whereby the Germans wanted access to a bigger market. France was frightened about the erosion of its countryside, particularly in the south. And so Germany paid a very substantial amount of money into the original deal in order to sustain the agricultural rural communities of the south. We just heard, it is the nation states. Just think what they will say when Britain turns up and says, we're prepared to come back, we know our contribution has to be X. They will all work out how much of that they will get, and they will therefore be attracted by the idea that having Britain back in and more money in their hands to help their regional problems, it will be very eloquent indeed.
Dagmar Seeland.